the 2024 KP Chen Memorial Lecture in Public Health. My name is Claire Lim. I'm from Institute of Health Policy and Management, School of Public Health, and National Taiwan University. Today we are gathered here to honor the life and legacy of Dr. KP Chen, a visionary leader whose commitments and contributions to the public health have left an indelible mark on our world. Dr. Chen's pioneering work and commitment to population health have inspired countless students and shaped the course of public health in Taiwan. In keeping up with Dr. Chen's spirit of intellectual curiosity and pursuit of knowledge, we present KP Chen Memorial Lecture annually to delve into the latest advancements and discuss the future directions of population health. This year, we are very honored to present Dr. Thomas Lovelace as our keynote speaker. Dr. Lovelace, please wave to the audience. Following his address, we will convene a panel discussion featuring our other distinguished experts, including Dr. Wenyin Sylvia Cho from NCI. Dr. Cho, over there. Dr. Linda Neuhauser from UC Berkeley. Dr. Myung Ki from Korea University. And Dr. Duan Chen, our own, from National Taiwan University. I'd also like to introduce our board member of the KP Chen Preventive Medicine Foundation, Dr. Chen Weijian. Thank you. Now, to officially kick off today's program, I would like to invite Dr. Zheng Shoufia, the Dean of our School of Public Health at National Taiwan University, to deliver a welcome remark.
Dear Dean Thomas Lovelace from Tulane University, distinguished guests, our dear colleagues, students, and my friends. On behalf of the College of Public Health at National Taiwan University, it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to attend the 2024 KP Memorial Lecture. Professor KP Chen has been the director of the Institute of Public Health for 17 years. Well, it won't occur again because it's regulated. And at that time, we really make a remarkable achievement during that time and make a very significant contribution in cultivating a public health workforce in Taiwan. And at that time, there's a huge need, and we just need this kind of necessary situation we needed. Due to his remarkable leadership and accomplishment, Professor KP Chen is considered the father of Taiwan's public health education. Back in the 1960s, if you notice that KP and his colleagues, they investigated and stopped the epidemic of black foot disease and gout in central and southern Taiwan. In addition, during that time, nobody mentioned about a future plan. He proposed a blueprint for the national health insurance like 60 years ago. And after 30 years, we have the national health insurance. Right now, we're enjoying it a lot. And the national health insurance was implemented by many his students, including Professor Jiang Donalis. He will come later. It's running a little bit late. That's the history. And nowadays, we are facing new challenges. For instance, the frequency and intensity of hurricane and typhoon. We are having like 5 typhoons and this summer, just last month. And we have droughts, and we have heavy rainfalls everywhere. And it occurs more often compared to the history of events. On the other hand, in the institution of public health, as educators and researchers, what we can do. I believe it is very important we can learn from each other. We can learn from painful experiences worldwide. I believe that's one of the main purposes of the KP Memorial Lecture. And of course, it's part of the purpose for the discussion this afternoon. And again, I welcome you to attend this conference and wish you a wonderful, successful meeting today. And for those student guests from abroad, hopefully you will enjoy the beautiful sun and beautiful stay in Taipei. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Now I would like to present Dr. Thomas Laveste. Dr. Thomas Laveste is the Dean and Weatherhead Presidential Chair in Health Equity, School Public Health, and Tropical Medicine from Chen University. He has an MA in Sociology and a PhD in Medical Sociology, both from University of Michigan. His specific research interests are, just to name a few, U.S. health and social policy, the role of race in health research, social factors contributing to mortality, longevity, and life expectancy, and many others. Now please join me in welcome our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Thomas Laveste. Dr. Chen, please present the word to Dr. Laveste. Dr. Chen, you may go back to your seat. Okay, before we really start this wonderful speech that we're going to hear, we need a group photo, right? So now we really are going to have Dr. Thomas Laveste on stage to deliver his keynote speech. His topic is as titled, Immigration Rising, How Population Change Will Affect the Public's Health. Please join me again in welcoming Dr. Thomas Laveste.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I was born in October jet lag, so I need your energy. Give me your I'll try to talk loud, and also I'll try to talk slow. I'm from New York City, so I'm a native speed talker. So I'm going to try to talk slow so you can follow my First, I want to thank my good friend Dean Chen for inviting me to give this lecture. This is a very prestigious lecture. I did some research did some research to understand the person who's being honored today, and this is Dr. Chen, and was very impressed by the incredible career that he had and the impact that he had creating the public health infrastructure in the nation of Taiwan. He is, I think, an excellent example of the very best of what we do in public health, and we are able to create structures to improve and protect the public health. And it's a great honor to be here. It's also an honor to be here because of the ongoing relationship between Chen University and National Taiwan University. Here's a picture. As we were saying, we take pictures of Taiwan all the time. There's a picture that we took together at a recent meeting we had in Washington between my staff and staff of National Taiwan University. Also, this is the best. Also honored to have been here in Taiwan in the past. So Tulane has a long-standing relationship with the country of Taiwan, particularly with Sichuan Memorial Hospital, the largest private hospital in Taiwan, with hospitals throughout the country. I've visited several of those hospitals now, and we continue to have a relationship with them. Many of their staff are alumni of our school, and we do one program, and we are planning to have another program where we'll be bringing more Taiwanese health professionals to New Orleans to do additional training at Chen. I'm also honored to have been here before. Here's an example of a picture that was taken from my last visit to Taiwan. And here's one of our alumni in his office. This is at a China Medical. And he's got a shrine to Taiwan, to New Orleans and Tulane in his office. So this is one of our many dinners. And I wanted to point out a very special person. This is Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen is a now retired professor from Tulane who really was instrumental in establishing a relationship between Tulane and National Taiwan University. Ted is doing well. I spoke to him recently and unfortunately couldn't travel, but otherwise he would be here today. So this lecture and this invitation is part of an ongoing relationship that is very important to Tulane University and National Taiwan University. And I'm pleased to come here today to nurture that relationship. Yes. I would also make one other point that I also have another role. I am currently the board chair for the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health, which is the professional association for academic public health in North America. The first school of public health outside of North America to be a member of the association is National Taiwan University, as it was the first accredited, school of public health outside of North America that was accredited in North America by CEF. And we're very honored to continue that legacy. As my role as board chair, I've been working to build on the global outreach for ASPPH. And we're using NTU as a model of how other public health schools in other parts of the world can become a part of our organization, which I think is critical because public health is global. Public health does not recognize international borders, and so we need to be able to communicate together, to work across regions, so that we can understand how we can learn from each other and protect public health. I want to say a few things about my school. So, the Tulane School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine was established in 1912. We are the first school of public health in the United States, the second school of public health in the world, second to the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I do like to point out that both Harvard and Johns Hopkins claim on their website to be the first school. 1912 was before 1913, which is when Harvard was founded, and it's before 1916, when Johns Hopkins was founded. Not the most important thing, but it is an important thing. But the most important thing is that we recently changed our name. And here are some pictures from our recent celebration. We've recently been gifted by an alumnus with a large endowment to establish a new name for our school. And we are now called the Celia Scott Leatherhead School of Public Health. And here is Celia, also Public Health. Okay, population. So usually, I'm the only demographer in the room. I expect I'm probably the only demographer here today. But if I'm not the only demographer, I'm going to talk about demography a little bit. If there are other demographers, I want to apologize to you first, because I'm going to not use demographic language. I'm going to use human language. I may talk about some demographic concepts, but I'll be talking about them in very abbreviated ways. So you can correct me later, we can talk later about it, but as a demographer, I want to say that population is one of the most powerful forces on the planet. Population. People move, people die, people are born, and it impacts virtually every aspect of society. And what we're facing now globally is population change happening because of immigration, because of migration across the regions of the world. And in every country, we're dealing with it in one way or another. The problem is different in different countries, but we're all dealing with it, or most countries are dealing with it in a very isolated way, as if it's their own unique problem. But what I see is a broader global restructuring happening that's impacting all countries. And I want to talk about what I think is happening and how this is part of a larger story, and not just a story about immigration, not just a story about migration, not just a story about the workforce and everything we represent, but it's a story about the evolution of societies. So these problems have been happening everywhere. They're just some pictures I pulled from the internet. Different countries facing these same problems. People in the streets protesting. England withdraws from the European Union primarily because of immigration. Taiwan, here, you've got issues around immigration and migration here. Your birth rate has dropped. You're not the lowest birth rate in the world. This is all part of this story that I want to tell and explain what's happening here. In the United States, the idea was that what we would do to address this problem is maybe we should just build a wall. If we can build a wall, then that would stop people from coming into the country. This is not a new idea, but it was presented as a new idea by our soon-to-be president. However, this has been tried before, unsuccessfully, and it has been tried in the United States. And while you can increase the technology to improve the efficacy of the wall, there are always ways to get around walls. And humans are infinitely creative. So the way that we're going to deal with this phenomenon that's happening globally is not by building walls, but by understanding what is going on and how do we reposition ourselves to take use of it. Now, most of what I'm going to talk about is coming out of the United States as an example. I think you will see parts of these examples in your country as well. And there will be some lessons, I hope, that we'll be able to learn from each other. So, in the United States, the core of the immigration issue comes down to an issue of race and ethnicity. And the way that race and ethnicity is impacting the culture. And people are reacting to the impacts of people from different cultural backgrounds coming into the country with different ways of living and how it's affecting the culture. In the 1600s, Europeans discovered that there were people living, that there was more of the planet, more than just Europe. And they discovered that there were people living on these other parts of the planet. And they began traveling around the world, meeting people. And discovering that people look differently. Some people were darker skin, some were lighter skin, some had different hair textures, and they were different physiologically. And they came up with this idea that, and they were also learning about new animals, new species of animals, and coming up with systems for classifying animals and species that they were becoming familiar with. And they thought that we could do the same thing with humanity. As we look at people, we see physiological differences. Skin texture, height, weight, things like that. And the idea was that this indicated that there were different species of humanity. And that humans could be classified into these groups. The problem is that this classification system is based purely on simple visual inspection of people and how they look. And we make the assumption that because two people have the same skin color, two people are the same gender, two people are part of the same ethnic group, that biologically they're similar. Well, we now know in the 21st century that this is very much untrue. Right? That there's more similarity across all humanity, and that those differences, those phenotypic differences, don't really speak to what's happening in the body in those cases. But in the United States, we established policy, an organized policy around this classification system called race. In 1977, the US government established a policy for classifying groups into these 5 categories based on the visual assessments that were done back in the 1600s and 1700s. So we took this information from 300 years ago and assumed that it was accurate, and we created categories based on that, even though the science had already told us that those categories were really superficial and didn't really say anything about As a result of this, we monitor these changes that's happening. And in the United States, we can see dramatic changes occurring within the culture as it relates to this concept of race. So this is data from the United States Census from 1950 to 2000. And what it shows is that the white population is dropping fast. In 1950, about 90% of Americans indicated on the census that they were white. By 2000, that was down to about 7%. And the Census Bureau is predicting that this will continue through the 21st century. And then by the middle of this century, the United States will be a majority of what we currently call racial and ethnic minorities. This will fundamentally change the nature of the culture of the country. This will make the country even more global, right? And we will have even more languages and more cultures involved. And where much of what's happening in the political and social space in the country is responding to this. Language is another area where we're seeing this occur, where we see that a growing number of people are speaking other languages, which is making things more complex, cost, and there are responses, and often these responses are not, they are policy responses, but they're not responding to the fundamental questions, but rather they're responding to people's emotional reactions, emotional responses. But this pleasure of the change that occur. So this is part of a broader phenomenon, which is the evolution of societies. Now here's where I'm going to get into the demography, so I apologize to my fellow democracy. In 1922, the demographic transition model was established. This model says that societies evolve through 4 stages of development. And I'm going to talk about each of those stages. These stages relate to the economics of the society and how it impacts the population in terms of births and deaths. So, the societies are said to go through 4 stages. The pre-industrial stage, pre-industrial stage, early industrialization and urbanization, mature industrial stage, and then finally post-industrial stage, which is where the United States and Taiwan are considered post-industrial countries. As we go through these stages, it has implications. It has implications for birth rates, death rates, and therefore population. So, let me explain each of these. In stage 1, these are basically hunter-gatherer societies, early agrarian cultures, where people have large numbers of children because we need children to work the farm, to grow food, to sustain their family. So having children is economically necessary. Also, in stage 1, we have very high death rates. So there's a very high mortality among children. And as a result, people have more children because they realize that some of the children will not survive to adulthood. So having more children increases the likelihood that some children will survive, and there's economic reason to have more children. When we move into stage 2, which is when society begins to industrialize, people begin to create more complex economies. So people doing different tasks which in the economy, so you don't need as many children. Children become less of a liability. And I can tell you, as someone who has 4 children, they quickly become a liability and not an asset economically. So but as we become more industrial, food security becomes better, health care becomes better, even if it's at its most primitive state, and people start to live longer. The birth rate begins to drop because people are living more secure lives, and the death rate begins to drop. And as a result, the population begins to increase. By stage 3, we become a more mature industrial society. Birth rates really drop because now it's really ineffective and inefficient to have more children. The death rates drop because we just have a more hygienic environment, people are living longer, fewer pathogens are impacting lives, and the population rises. Now, what they couldn't determine in 1922 is what would happen next. What would be stage 5? And there was a lot of fear that stage 5 would lead to a population explosion. and that the population of the planet becomes so large that we would not be able to feed the people on the planet. Okay? And for any of you who was here in the 1960s, as I was, I remember the 60s, I was born then, there was a lot of fear about these issues. We were talking about zero population growth, maintaining increasing the number of births so that we don't have a population, reducing the number of births so that we don't have population explosion. This is a cover from Time magazine, one of the major publications in the United States in the 1960s, talking about how population is going to overwhelm the planet. There was a movie, one of my favorite movies as a sci-fi nerd, back in the early 70s, it was a movie called ZPG, Zero Population Growth, which was about this idea of how society can be restructured to maintain zero population growth. The United Nations creates the United Nations Population Fund. The United States government creates USAID, all with the goal of controlling population. But what happened is that instead of the population explosion that was created, we had basically two different things happen in two different parts of the planet. In one part of the planet, we had a population implosion. That may be a little exaggerated, not being that implosion, but a drop in birth rates. And in other parts of the world, we did have this explosion. And so here's what happened. When you look at countries that are what we would call stage 4 countries from the demographic model, stage 4 countries have all had reductions in their birth rates. And one more thing to the demographers in the room. I will be using birth rate and fertility rate interchangeably. I know they're not the same thing. Just bear with me. We can discuss that later. But some of these slides will say birth, some will say fertility because that's the data that I have available. But they're telling the same story. So when you look at the fertility rate in the United States, we see that we are now below the replacement rate. Just to be clear, replacement rate, just so we all know what we're talking about, it's having enough births and in-migration to keep the population, to counteract the deaths and out-migration to maintain this population at its current level. Right? That's all we're trying to do. That's the replacement rate. The United States fertility rate is now below the replacement rate. When you look at the European Union, every country in the European Union is now below the replacement rate. Look at all OECD countries. All OECD countries are below the replacement rate. In Latin America, we're seeing fertility rates dropping in Latin America. Will soon be below the replacement rate. So if you look at all the countries at the bottom, we see OECD, United States, European Union, Latin America, all at or below or at replacement rate. Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa continue to have high birth rates and produce a lot of people, and a lot of the immigration is coming from the immigration into the OECD countries are coming from those countries. At the same time, we have drivers such as climate change impacting these countries, making it more difficult for people to do subsistence farming and to live in these societies. And so this incentivizes people further to leave, seeking economic opportunity. Taiwan, I want to point this out to you, just so you can see, obviously, I think everyone here is pretty familiar with this issue here in Taiwan, that Taiwan now has the lowest replacement rate. The last time I was here, about 7 years ago, we were the third lowest. We're now tied for the lowest. So we're moving in the wrong direction here, and that's it. These are issues that are receiving a great deal of attention in all of these countries, including Taiwan. Low birth rate challenges Taiwan's future. Taiwan's population declines for 8 consecutive months. 4 universities closed because of lost enrollment. But this, I think this is the point. New births in Taiwan fall to a record low when the population rises. What the demographic transition model didn't account for was migration. That people move and the population can remain stable It's not just births and deaths. So, with this immigration comes social and economic and public policy issues that need to be addressed. So, remembering the model, the 4 stages that we go through. The 5th stage is the stage of multiculturalism. We now have to contend with societies becoming multicultural. And in some societies, that is new. Other societies are more familiar with it. In stage 5, stage 4 countries will attract immigration from non-stage 4 countries. The immigrant population will have a larger percentage of childbearing age people, because who immigrates? The young people, young healthy people immigrate, and then they'll be childbearing age. They're coming from stage 3 countries, which have higher fertility rates. So culturally, people are more attuned and more accustomed to having more children. And it takes time before those cultural understandings begin to modify into the new economic reality where they're living. So the expectation is that the migrants, the new immigrants, would have a higher birth rate because culturally they're attuned to having more children. And this will accelerate the transition of the society. In the case of the United States, it will transition, accelerate our transition into a society that is majority non-white. So let's talk about each of these. Immigration, the foreign born population in the United States has dramatically increased from 1960 to 2000 to 2020 to about 44 million. When you look at immigration from Europe to the United States, back in 1960, it was the primary source of immigration to the United States. Over the years, that has declined, and now by 2020, European immigration is pretty much leveled off. When we look at immigration from Asia, this does continue to rise in the United States. Asia has become the second largest producer of immigrants into the United States, and that's continued to grow. When you look across all world regions, Latin America is by far the largest producer of immigrants into the United States. Each of this comes with cultural impacts, societal impacts. And this is just putting into the stage, into the demographic transition model. It used to be that immigration in 1990, immigration was primarily coming from stage 4 countries, here, and then by 2010, it was primarily stage 4 countries. Let's go through each of these. So first, population. Here's the population pyramid for the United States showing U.S. citizens compared to the foreign-born population. What it shows, that for the U.S. born population, shows a fairly traditional population pyramid. Large numbers of people at the younger ages, and as the pyramid goes up, fewer people, which is what you expect. With the foreign-born population, we see a diamond shape, not a pyramid at all. And this is because young children generally don't immigrate. It's usually young men in their 20s and 30s are usually immigrating by themselves without women. So therefore they're not producing children. Later on, they begin to bring children, women come into the country, more children start to develop. So we have a large percentage of our population in that in the childbearing ages. We look at fertility rates. Now this is not fertility rates just for the foreign-born population. We could not access that data. This is showing the broader group. This is including both citizens and non-citizens, but the pattern is still showing the same pattern that we would expect, which is that the white population, we see a decrease in the fertility rate from 2000 to 2010. Black population has a lower fertility rate, but still higher than the white fertility rate. The American Indian, Alaska Native population is relatively stable in terms of its fertility rate, but again, about equal to the fertility rate of the white population. The Asian and Pacific Islander population in the United States fertility rate is higher than the white population, and finally, the Hispanic population fertility rate is higher than the white population. So even if that wall was built along the southern border of the United States, and even if that wall somehow was successful and people didn't find a way to bridge the wall, the United States will become a minority majority eventually because of birth and death. This just shows again the children again, this shows the same pattern. Age of first birth is lower for each of these ethnic groups compared to whites, which means that if the first birth happens earlier in the childbearing age period, there's more time to have additional births. Right? And this is largely because of the high level of education of white women that are going to school, delaying education, and delaying childbirth, more frequently into the 30s, where other populations are not doing that. So, this is what's happening. These states or countries, native population fertility rate is lower, foreign-born population is greater, because in the childbearing ages, and foreign-born population having their first birthday in their ages. Likely, similar patterns was happening in Taiwan. Now, there are negative impacts, negative implications for this potential. Tracking and managing health data becomes more difficult. So surveillance becomes more difficult because we can't track people as well, especially if there are people in the country illegally, which we have in the United States. There are people that are undocumented, that are not recorded, so we're not picking on the data systems. It makes it hard for us to be able to do surveillance. There's a demand increase for healthcare, utilization, of course. People get ill, they need healthcare. There are barriers to utilizing that healthcare, which means that our healthcare organizations now have to devote more resources to these cultural dynamics, understanding these cultural differences, understanding linguistic differences, all of which can impact the quality of care. There's social and economic impacts. There's economic strain on the society. Just more people coming into the country to create strain on the resources, health disparities, health equity, and this symposium for today becomes more of a challenge because we have more vulnerable groups coming into the country that they can be cared for. And of course, there are severe mental health challenges. And there are a number of studies that have shown impacts on mental health and immigration, all of which requires more resources. And this requirement of resources is having a negative impact in many cases, particularly from a political perspective. In the United States, we also have an aging population, which is also part of the story. So as the proportion of Americans that are over age 65, the proportion of Americans that are no longer in the workforce gets larger, and they're living longer, those populations need to be supported by the economy, even though they're no longer contributing to the economy in terms of their work. So we need a workforce to maintain the economy. And migration is the way to get that workforce, which is the strategy that Taiwan is using as well. As a result, however, healthcare spending is continuing to rise. In the United States, the country with the largest economy, in fact, the largest economy in history, we are now approaching 20% of our gross domestic product being spent on healthcare. That's 1/5 of the largest economy spending on just healthcare. And you can see that the percentage has grown dramatically over decades. There will be policy impacts, needs for policies to address immigrant-specific issues. So, in fact, I was just learning before leaving to come, we have a new outbreak of dengue in New Orleans. This is mostly the result of immigrants from Central America, where they have higher prevalence of the disease. We have the disease in Louisiana, but they're coming in with higher prevalence, which is impacting, again, our resources. We're not developing new surveillance systems to try to deal with dengue. So these costs occur because of it. We have to train our staff, our workers, healthcare workers, to be more culturally competent, to understand the cultures, the cultural nuances of different patients, and that is, of course, an expensive proposition. And of course, there's a reliance on emergency services, all of which have implications for our resources. what are the complexities, even within the topic of health equity, as the various ethnic groups become more nuanced and more complex because of migration. So we talked about these groups in the United States: Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, and we use these terms as if they're monolithic groups and monolithic terms. But in fact, there's a great deal of nuance. So in the United States, we categorize people as Asian, but it could be from China, Taiwan, from Korea, from Vietnam, all different countries with different cultures, different languages, different history, different traditions. We consider them all Asian, right? And that nuanced difference between those groups gets lost, and we make policy on such a broad category. The policy may work for many, but will not work for many others. So even in the United States, so we have China. We consider people from China to be Asian. We consider people from India to be Asian. Right? The two largest populations with dramatic ethnic diversity in both of those countries. And all of that diversity we put together and say, they're just Asian. Right? And then sometimes we add Pacific Islanders to that, just to make it even worse. Right? These are the strategies that we use. We need more nuanced ways of dealing with these issues. Hispanic is another interesting category. What does Hispanic mean? People who come from countries that was at one time colonized by Spain. That's the only thing I can think of. Right? Except Brazil is also Hispanic, and they are Portuguese, of course. So there's a historical and cultural difference, and we don't account for that difference. White Americans, quite diverse as well. What is a white American? A person who has an ancestry from Europe. Well, if we were doing a study, and let's say we're doing a study in Spain, and we wanted to have a population of people who was as homogeneous as possible, we would not include people that were not from Spain, that was living in Spain, because we would assume that those people might be different. If we were doing that same study in Greece, we would only use Greeks. We would not use people from other parts of Europe that are living in Greece, because we want to have as homogeneous a population as possible. But the descendants of all of these countries go to the United States, and somehow we consider them to be one group of people, even though they come from all over different countries. Same thing for Black Americans. Where most Black Americans ancestry come from West and Central Africa. Most had this historical, this is really most have this historical, this similar history going through slavery, which we all know. But increasingly, and now actually the majority of Black Americans do not have ancestry from slavery because of immigration, people coming from the Caribbean and from Africa. So this complexity has an impact, or should have impacts on our research. Although I would note that rarely do I see researchers, certainly in the United States, but I have to say I haven't seen much research in any other country that has accounted for this kind of nuanced difference in the cultures of people that were categorized into these groups. There's also a business reason. In the United States, there's a business reason why. I'll tell you a little story about that was told to me by a friend who was. Can someone tell me how I'm doing the time? I have no idea. This one time. Oh, okay. Oh, you're taking. Oh, okay. You let me know. Okay. Go ahead. The story. It's a story about a hospital. This is a hospital in a mid-sized city in the United States. I won't say the city or the hospital because the person that told me the story is the hospital is there. This is the warden of the hospital, and he asked me not to share who this was. It doesn't matter for this story. This was a hospital who a patient came to be seen. This patient was a child. The parents were in the country. It was not clear whether they were legally in the country or not. But this child needed emergency services and went to the hospital. The parents didn't speak English, and they were trying to communicate as best they could with the parents, understand what the child needed. They didn't bring an interpreter into the room. So the surgeon, who was highly respected in the community, invited the daughter and said he cared deeply about his patients and had many successful surgeries. It was basically revered by all of the community. Everyone agreed that this person deeply cared about patients and was not cavalier at all. But he did not bring a translator into the room. He spoke a little bit of Spanish. I guess he couldn't order a beer in Tijuana. He thought that he could communicate enough with the patient. And as a result, did not have all the accurate information. Went into the procedure, and it led to a serious damage to the child's kidney, which will impact the child for the rest of their life. So the family went back home, devastated at what happened to the daughter. But later learned that there were lawyers, and that the lawyer could sue the hospital. So the lawyer comes to the hospital, so they contact the hospital and tell the hospital that they're going to sue. And the hospital immediately settles for $12 million. Why does the hospital immediately settle for $12 million without going to court, without fighting? Well, the reason is that the United States is illegal to treat a patient who doesn't speak English without an interpreter. And malpractice insurance does not cover civil rights violations. And it's considered a civil rights violation to not bring an interpreter to the law. The hospital knew immediately they were going to lose this case, spending money and trying to fight it, just make it worse, so they immediately settled. How many hospitals in the United States do you think could afford a $12 million settlement like that? I can assure you there are very few, if any, that can do that. So there's a business imperative. Even if you don't care about people who only care about economics, there's a business imperative that you must address these complex issues and be prepared to deal with them. Further, this is a study that I led, that we've been doing over the years. We did this for the first time in 2008, when the United States was working on healthcare reform. And when we were going through this process of healthcare reform, there was a lot of discussions about what could we add to the reform that would address health equity issues. And this, of course, became a big political fight. Some people didn't want to put the resources into that, other people did. And we decided, well, what if we did this analysis that we could maybe help the people who wanted to input the health equity into the Affordable Care Act. So we did this analysis to look at what is the impact on the U.S. economy of having health inequities. How expensive is it to have people that are sicker than they should be, using more resources than they should otherwise use, and dying prematurely? So after we invest in people's human capacity, we invest in their education, and then they go to work, but then they die at an early age, and we don't get a return on that investment because they don't get to work within the economy. When we calculated that cost at $1.24 trillion, which is about the size of the economy of India. This was first done in 2008. We replicated that study again last year and found that not only has the cost has actually increased over the years, and that health disparities is now costing us even more, an even larger portion of our gross domestic product. My suspicion is that if similar analysis to this was done in other countries, in Taiwan, that you would find that the health inequities that you're experiencing between the migrant population and the native population, between the rural and the urban population, those are costly, expensive, and have had an impact on the economic performance of the country, as we did in the United States. So I've talked about the negative impacts of this immigration, but it's important also to point out that there are positive impacts as well. cultural diversity, for many of us, certainly I think cultural diversity is a good thing. I think it's interesting to learn about other cultures and all other countries. I went to your museum yesterday just to see some of the treasures you have there. A little bit more about the history of this country. I find that interesting. I think most people do find that valuable. There is value in having people with different ideas. Not just that, more ethnic diversity helps a society to connect better to the world. So the fact that we had Chen in the United States helped us to connect with Taiwan and to build up this relationship that I personally value a great deal. So we're lucky that Chen immigrated to the United States. So these types of, so this could be positive from the economies, from businesses. Learning about new cultures, we can learn about new products that can be developed to meet the needs of these other cultures. So there's economic advantage and economic opportunities associated with it. There's a great deal of potential. Mostly we do it because of the workforce. And as we see in the United States with the Asian population, we need a younger workforce and with the birth rate being as low as possible, and as low as it is, women are able to bring these good forces. So I want to thank you. I'm going to close out here and look forward to the conversation, and thank you for your attention this morning. And thank you for the honor of giving this important lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Lovest. Next, we will have, as promised, we will have the panel. I would like to introduce the members of this panel. The first one will be Dr. Wenying Sylvia Zhou Wenying. Dr. Zhou is a program director in the Health Communication and Informatics Research Branch of the Behavioral Research Program at the National Cancer Institute. She's a prolific health communication scholar with over 100 peer-reviewed articles and had led many NIH initiatives on the impact of the evolving communication landscape on public health and cancer control. She has a PhD in linguistics from Georgetown University and an MPH from UC Berkeley. Next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Linda Hauser. Dr. Hauser is a clinical professor of community health science at UC Berkeley School of Public Health, and she's a co-PI at the Health Research for Action Center. I learned that yesterday. Her research and teaching are focused on participatory approaches to improve larger-scale health interventions and policies. She has an MPH and a Dr. PH in Public Health and Nutrition from UC Berkeley. Welcome. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Myung Ki. I hope I pronounced that right. Dr. Ki is a professor and head of 2 departments, Preventive Medicine of College of Medicine and Global and Community Health of School of Public Health at Korea University. His research interests are suicide prevention, mental health epidemiology, and community health related to social determinants of health. He is an MD from Korea University, and PH from Seoul National University, and a PhD in epidemiology and public health from University of College London. Welcome. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Dr. Chen Chen of our own. Dr. Chen is a professor in Institute of Health Behaviors and Community Sciences at National Taiwan University. She has made significant contributions to understanding health inequalities, obesity, eating behaviors, and community-based health interventions. She had an MA in Sociology from National Taiwan University and PhD in Sociology from Columbia University. Welcome. Now I'd like to turn this to Dr. Chen Duanrong to moderate this panel discussion. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Chen, and I'm here as a discussant, also a moderator. So now we like to lay out the rule. Okay, so first we will invite each of the discussants to give some Dean's this presentation, and then we will invite Dean this to give some feedbacks. And then after that, we have a freestyle. So we will each one of will discuss freely. And in the end, Dean this will give us 5 comments. Okay. So now I will invite Dr. P to give us some response.
Actually, I'm not an expert in this area, but still, with the common sense from the Korean situation, I can have many thoughts, and maybe I could bring some implication to this talk. Anyway, thank you very much for good information. All of your lectures was very, very informative for me. And so in Taiwan, you fear a bit of danger of the population shortage, reducing the workforce and introducing the immigrants. But because of the low birth rate, but I think the Korea has recorded recently the worst on the low birth rate. So very surprisingly, 0.7. Yeah, 0.7. That's our record. Maybe world top. So that means we are ahead of your experience, and maybe not a good example for that. So in minority, we are usually trying to separate the concept, the region, community from the space. We are living in an area, but it's not just a space. It is daily living as the context. So we are saying that's the region or that's the community. So if we are well prepared, then the immigrants, they can bring their own strengths. But actually in Korea, well, I have to say they are just ignorant. In our urban area, we cannot see them, or so they are we cannot feel the problem. So as he rightly presented, they are not in our health figure, not in the surveillance, not in any statistics. So even I think 2 million people. So we are saying their scale is getting larger and larger, but still they are not inside our society. Actually, I have to say. And so that's the kind of aftermath for them. So for example, in recent days, there was a report among the immigrant workers. If they died in Korea, then it's a shame. But the 90% of people are just buried without any verification of death. That's the situation. Very sad, but that's the truth. This is just the aftermath for them. But I think still there are people, because even the humiliation or all the ordeals, but they have to come to this country because for their like a survival or for living. So there may be some other countries follow this example, but so I think like a social construct, how to make the community. That's I think the first thing we have to prepare. Yeah, so, but the community building, we are not very much well prepared in Korea. We are very lacking in many ways. So I'm sorry for them to come to the country. It's not a blessing for them. So, but yes, there are many some positive future for us, for them. Yeah. And so we may need to learn each other. Yeah. So thank you very much. This is my.
As far as I know, Korea has a very low birth rate. Sometimes, some years even lower than Taiwan. And Korea, South Korea has the highest suicide rate for young adults, especially in society. So how that is affect population growth? I think something they can think about. Okay, so please invite Chen.
Thank you so much, and I really enjoyed your talk, and I like to phrase it in. Is it too loud? Am I okay? Okay. So I've been thinking a lot about all the data and showing kind of that we're all in this together, right? No matter where you go, boundaries, political boundaries, linguistic, cultural differences, we live in the world, and sort of one problem has another side to it. People don't just leave for no reason, in the US, for example. But we also see such a rise of nationalism all globally across the world. And I know some of that is attributable to racism, xenophobia. Sometimes it's very convenient for politicians to make issue of immigration because it is a way to divide people and to assert a certain ideological stance. So what can we do to communicate and convince policymakers that a simple law won't solve this problem, that there are so many nuanced pieces that you've already outlined, both if you phrase it as positive, negative, or resilient, and different ways. And sort of a sub-part of that question is maybe it's not just about communicating with policymakers, it's about working with the community, because it's people that elect their officials. And so how do we deal with systemic prejudice or racism? Because I think that undergirds so much of this inability to consider all the points you well articulated in terms of constructive solutions. So that's sort of, it's not so much a comment, but kind of a question for all of us to ponder. So thank you.
Move to Professor Newell Hauser.
Thank you. I want to congratulate you on a very compelling talk. There are just too few demographers in our public health. I agree.
I'm not sure about that.
And so now, well, in these spaces, we don't get enough opportunity. So I've got some of the same comments as other Professor Cho. And as I listened to you talk, what was really impressive to me is that it's so hard for people to understand the power of population change and the positive impacts of migration. So how are we going to do that? I was thinking our roles here as maybe academic researchers, many of us, what can we do about this? So I think we can work together more with demographers. And I think that in our research, we could try to make the case for the positive impacts of migration. And there's a lot of ways we can do that. I was just sitting here thinking about a study that would be somewhat similar to what you've been writing about. And that is, what would have happened in the United States if we did not have migration over the past 20 years? How much would our gross national product have gone down? How many new businesses would be gone? And many other effects of that. What would have happened to our healthcare system, to our ability to take care of the aging population? So the U.S. is not in as bad a situation as, say, Taiwan, Korea, some other countries, because we've had in-migration. But it's very hard to make that case. And so I think we need to show the negative, or we'll say the opposite of what's happening with migration, which is how much is that benefiting us compared to the problems in other countries. Another question, I'm turning to Professor Cho right now, because as a communicator, maybe you have some suggestions about how we can communicate things so that our countries understand the benefits of migration. And one final comment is, you mentioned the research opportunities. I thought that was quite interesting. And you mentioned the large groupings of, let's say, ethnic categories, and how we often use these big categories like Hispanic or Asian, when we're really talking about very different groupings. And I was thinking about my colleague, Professor Winston Zhang, and how this is part of the work you do to break down these categories with the Asian groups that we work with. So I think as researchers, we can go out and break down these groups. We can create interventions that communicate better the positive impacts. Let's say the critical need for migration. So just a few things. But I wonder, what you think about that.
I'd like to make a comment too. First thing, this has done such a wonderful presentation, and especially the part about immigration that attract my attention most. Because in Taiwan, we also have the issue of very low birth rate. And some of my friends, from demographers, they say now is a turn of no return. Taiwan has not able to regain high birth rate. You have to tolerate such a shortage of manpower. So they start, the government or the experts start to recommend using policy to attract immigrants or international marriage to address the issue of manpower shortage. And we do have like an immigration policy. Like in 1996, we have a southbound policy. I don't know if you know that. And that's from President Lee Teng-hui. And till 2016, we have a new southbound policy from Tsai Ing-wen Zongtong, and they promote international exchange, and that give us a good boost of international marriage. So now the new resident constitute like 2.36% of the total population. The second generation of those immigrant family constitute like 7% of the student population. And I have done some research regarding the second generation students, because we here enjoy cultural diversity. We enjoy Thai food, enjoy Korean food, etc. But we still to believe that those generations has fully integrated into our society. They no longer has any problem with the stress or problem related to integration. But however, from my own study, I found that from children, to adolescents, even to high school students, those second generation students, they seem to suffer a lot from low self-esteem, and they suffer from emotional eating, controllable eating, those expression of depressed mood. So what they suffer that those populations seem to be ignored by this optimistic view of cultural diversity. We believe they are fully integrated. However, they even have full access to health service, and they have no discrimination whatsoever in terms of an institution framework. But somehow they still suffer certain accumulation stress that reflect on the second generation's body. As I say, they present a higher preference emotional eating or uncontrollable eating. So it's also addressed to Professor Key for those immigrant, second generation immigrants. Probably there's no inequality issue in terms of institutional framework. However, they might suffer inequality of mental health issue.
You said that the second generation, they have the same rights as any other person, but they find a mental health difference. We find other health differences. It's just mental.
From my study,
yeah.
It's only the mental health. But I haven't done so much work. But it's the
Is that the end decision?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'll leave that one.
Okay. So this is my comments from Taiwan. So I will invite Dean Davis to give us some your response.
Yeah, I'll start with you. I thought that was really interesting. So there have been some studies in the United States done on populations, and I guess this goes back to the 1980s. Coastal Hughes did a study and developed a concept we call the Hispanic paradox. And what he found was that the Hispanic immigrants coming into the United States actually had better health outcomes than the native U.S. population. But then the second generation didn't. Their health began to decline, in fact, was doing worse than the population. So it seems that you're having a similar kind of pattern. I mean, it makes sense that the generation that immigrated in the better health outcomes, these are people who made the choice. They chose to come here. And this is what they wanted to do for the reason. They were healthy enough, and usually they're young, healthy people who make their choices. So it's not that surprising that they would have good outcomes. But even when bad things happen to them, they realize, okay, this is what I wanted to do, I knew it was hard. Their children, however, are different. They didn't choose to come here. Right? They have these family members and they have this life in the other country, right? Which they may not be connected to. But they know that they have grandparents in the other country, that they're cousins, that they are a part of that country too. But they're not here part of it. And they're living in Taiwan. And maybe it'll take time for them to assimilate. But when you look at the white American population of the United States, that is what happened. They did ultimately assimilate, and they did ultimately just become Americans. So I think it could get to it, but it does appear that we're having the same pattern that we had. Maybe it could be the third generation, when we start to see a full integration. That would be our reaction to that. Let's get back to you. So South Korea. So I wouldn't fight for the title of lowest birth rate, right? But Korea and Taiwan. I don't know how to want that honor. Either way, and hopefully, I'm sure my friends here in Taiwan hope that you win. And South Korea. But no, seriously, low birth rate is really, it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity too. And you can think of it as both. And I hope that point came out that it's a challenge. Because you do need to stimulate employment and fuel your economy. But it's an opportunity. And if you manage it well, I don't pretend that I can tell you which country has managed this well. In fact, I can't think of a country that's managed it well. But it sounds like Taiwan is doing better than most of the countries. And I think thinking about how do we integrate those that want to be integrated, and how do we accommodate those who want to be a part of South Korea, but not fully, give up their own culture. How do we accommodate them? I think that's the challenge, and that's very difficult. I don't pretend that that's easy to do, but I do think that's where we need to be focusing on how do we do that. And from there, I was going to respond to you, which I think was also related. What would happen had there not been immigration? That was a really interesting study, actually. I didn't think about that a bit. See whether or not I could come up with something creative about that. So I'll let you know when we collaborate on that. But I think what you're raising is a very political question. Because that's really what it's press. It all falls into the political realm. The policymakers need to manage it. And policymakers respond to the public. So the policymakers, the political leaders are led by the people, and they also lead the people. They can go in both directions. So what we have in the United States is a population that is, I'd say, there's a good amount of hostility towards migration. And then we had politicians that came in and took advantage of that and stimulated it and made it worse, right? For their own political gain. And I'm not specifically talking about the Trump administration, because I've seen politicians on all sides use immigration to try to use it to their advantage. So that's I'm not but it's politicians use it because it's what helps them get elected, and they do. But I think it's a shame because it challenges the ability to do what I think South Korea and Taiwan can do, which is both accommodate the new cultures and also assimilate the people, and it will modify the country. And if you really think about it, the way that the American culture was created, I mean, what is American culture? It's people from all over the world that came to this one place, and all of those cultures come together to create this new country, right? This is a 250-year-old culture. We're not, I've seen buildings 800 years old in Europe, right? So countries like Taiwan, like South Korea, that have long-standing cultures, it is going to be more difficult for them to adjust, to change to this culture that's been evolving for all these years. So it is a complex problem. But I love this idea of this research project. I'm going to think about it. I'll reach out. If I come up with anything that I think we could do it, I would love to do that. There's one other point that came to mind as you were talking about South Korea, a point that came to mind that I didn't mention in my lecture, and I wish I had, which is that the risk of exploitation of migrant workers and how that has happened in many different countries, including my country, including this country. There have been accusations of that, of people not being paid and compensated properly for their work, people in work conditions that are not safe, living conditions that are not safe, and there is great opportunity for exploitation with breaking immigration to the country. So that's another thing that policymakers need to be thinking about. How do we ensure that we establish policies that would stop that from happening? And my final comment is communications. That is, I left that one because that is the most important area. I'm on this, I'm glad to have had a chance to meet you, and I'll talk to you about this later, but I'm on this crusade to have the the accreditors for public health schools to strengthen the requirements around health communication. I think everybody in public health should have training in health communications. During the pandemic, I served as chair of the Louisiana Governor's Task Force on COVID. Louisiana, we had one of the worst outbreaks in Louisiana. And I learned so much about what I didn't know and wish I did know. And I would say a lot of that was in communications. Most of it was in communications. I saw some horribly bad communications happening from public health, from CDC. And I'll just say a couple of things. Social distance, that is the stupidest term I've ever heard. It is not what we're asking people to do. We're asking them to be physically distant. Plus, when people are living in isolation, we don't need social distance, we need social connection. So we should never even say those two words in the same sentence, let alone make that a phrase. That was stunningly bad. I'm still shocked at how bad that was. The effort to create a flu vaccine in the United States was called Operation Warp Speed. I actually did meet with those people and said to them, why did you think calling it Operation Warp Speed was a good idea? I mean, you're focusing on how fast the vaccine is being developed, which creates fear of that you're going to cut corners, that you're going to not have a fully developed vaccine. I said what you needed to call it was Operation as fast as possible, but very carefully without cutting any corners to make sure that it's as safe as possible. Now that doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, right? But that's the narrative that needed to be put out. Instead, the narrative was, we're doing this fast. We're going to do a 6-month trial, a 6-week trial, and then we're going to vaccinate 300 million people. It's a scary concept, right? But what health communications I think is really critical, I think that should be a core competency of every public health professional, and it is not, and we're often suffering for it.
I'll say I'm gratified to hear a dean of public school of public health recognizing this topic. I really do think a lot of times communication is seen as an afterthought. You know, we've developed this great innovations, drugs or medicine. Let's get the communicators to get it out. Well, it doesn't work that way because human beings are complicated, and we make decisions not just by even facts and data. Sometimes it's the heart, right? It's the feeling. Do you feel warm about the people that share that information? Do you feel like they have your best interests at heart? Or do they have some ulterior motives that they're trying to promote in using me as a way to advance some other agenda? So I think you talked about branding as an example. How do you call something? I think public health, and maybe you mentioned, what can public health do? I think we can collect data that help policymakers see the resilience and positive impacts of migrants, for example. I think data do speak a lot for a certain agenda, but I don't think data is sufficient. I think it's about building relationships, and I know you'll talk about community-based participatory work and other ways of actually doing more ground-up work. I think we do so much top-down, even including in public health. You know, we should get this promoted and get it to people. We need to do more of building from the bottom up, building trust, you know, making people feel that you care about them. And sometimes that might be more perennial, you know, something that you build. And then when you have a public health emergency, you know that the trusted voices are able to communicate with the community. So that's something I think we learned a lot during the pandemic. And I remember at the beginning of it, at NIH, we actually convened all behavioral and communication scientists, and we published a report on vaccine communication. I go back, and it still holds. But I had this idea of bringing politicians from across the aisle to roll up the sleeves together and show that this is not a political decision. This is about protecting health, but there are other barriers that make that difficult to do in a polarized society, but I do think we need to present, and I think in Taiwan there are great opportunity because so much of public health is not politicized in the same way. And I think we should really learn from that and leverage that type of framing to do greater goods for all, not just whose agenda we're serving.
Thank you. With this topic, it's so difficult not to raise the issue of race in health equity. So I would like to address Dean, Nafis, and Linda, and also Sylvia. What's your take on African Americans or Asian Americans, how these different race, how they play out in the health equity in American, and what's the status? Because we often encounter literature, they still indicate that some African Americans or Asian Americans still has lower quality of life as compared to white Americans. So what's your take on this? Maybe you can share with us.
Yeah. So recently I was part of a committee for the National Academy of Medicine who just issued a report updating the report from 2003 that shows the racial disparities in the United States. And what we showed in that report is that there really has not been much change. The disparities still exist. And some people are saddened by that, but I take a different path. I would love to make progress. But I do also recognize that it took us over 200 years to get to where we are. And I don't expect that we're going to fix this in 20 years. It's going to take time. Culture is, I talked about the power of English, but culture is very powerful thing. Culture kind of overpowers everything. Right? And cultures change very slowly. So it's going to take time. So I think it was unrealistic to expect that we were going to fix this 2-century problem. So that's the way I look at it. We have to continue to do the work, continue to try to address the disparities, but we can't have, our expectations to be, I think, more appropriate.
So how Peter takes on this issue?
Well, I agree with Dean Levis because I think that we have to be realistic about changes. But I think we also have to be very proactive. The kind of work that we do here, we have to be able to detect changes. We have issues before, let's say, the political leaders are aware of them. So when we were talking about, for example, health disparities due to healthcare and racism. And that's an area where a lot of people have been doing very good research to find out what does it actually mean when you feel discriminated against when you're getting healthcare. What does it actually mean? And what can you do about it? So we actually have a lot of interventions that relate to what you also mentioned about cultural competency and training. Our center does a lot of that with health providers. So training the providers in a way that they never were trained in their health professional schools. They never got this training about cultural differences and what you can do, how you can be alerted, how you can do better as a communicator. So that's one of the jobs we've taken on. I think that's a really important thing to be kind of the sentinel people here to bring up these issues. But not only issues, but what are some of the solutions. And I was thinking too, Professor Chen, you were mentioning the second generation having a lot of depression. That didn't surprise me at all. Because you have people who are between two cultures. Their parents may feel incredibly lucky to have come and had the opportunity to be in a culture that may offer more opportunities for them, or at least for their children. But the children, they're not expecting maybe the racism that they're feeling. So the answer there may be to go to them and try to find ways to find out what they are feeling. Is there subtle racism? There probably is. So that's something I was just thinking about here.
We have a whole day. There's so much to talk about. I guess I'll just reference one particular example. Kind of 2021, there were several public health studies doing data mining on the hashtag China virus that was perpetuated by a lot of people, including people in power. Actually, this was, when was it? I'm getting my dates off, but and they were correlating the use of such hashtag with a rise in anti-Asian violence. And there was such clear connection between online hatred and online language use and offline behavior and Asian Americans' perceived experience of discrimination. And I think that's another reason we need to think about communication, because it's not just actions and policies, it's words, and it's how we talk about people and experiences. So that was one experience that showed me that it's never just about a tweet or a phrase. There's more to it, and there's public health impact of that. That was specifically for Asian Americans, of course. When you say China virus, people can't tell you were from China, Taiwan, Korea. So the felt of anti-Asian hate was, it was felt by many people who look or could pass as Asian, East Asian. And the only other thing I would say about race and racism is that at NIH and NCI, we're looking to promote more intersectional research. So we don't just look at race in categories, but looking at socioeconomic level, education, rurality, urban, and really not thinking about race in such coarse ways, but even using existing data, but looking at it through these intersectional lens. We just completed more, program announcements hoping to promote that type of work. So.
Thank you. So how about Professor P? Any comments from Korea?
Is it okay? Yeah. Actually, Korea has been boasting about their like a very homogeneous. We even say the blood, pure blood something. That's the, but it's no longer true. But we are like academic area. That's not a racial issue or ethnicity issue. It's not deeply brought into this. Just some part, some experts are there, and the main measuring really the start point. So we don't know the actual situation, and even I think there's a kind of political things. So politicians don't want to bring this issue to the society because it is not favor of their popularity. So they are strongly fight against recognizing the minority issues. So, but I'm would bring the other things as a public health academics. We are also experiencing, in my view, from the society, like a community, the integration. Because of we are pursuing the profit. This is the good business, actually. So I'm not sure whether what is going on in this country, but I'm last semester, I got a guest from the Akita University from Japan, and she asked me to go with her to the community work if we are doing something, outreach. So she wants to see there is some what is going on in the field, the real story. But yes, I can introduce some place. But for me, I have no connection, direct connection to the field. But so I thought back the previous years when I was in Canada as a visiting professor, and when I was studying and working in the UK, I saw that the supervisor who went to Manchester, and he so there is like a community work, and he assigned 2 students every year to study what's going on the community organization, their work, to evaluate. So that's the kind of academics can contribute to make a bond to the organization by our expertise. And also in Canada, one professor said she is doing their every month developing a guideline for asthma people. So is there any profit or gain for them, like some money? But she said, oh, no such things. It's just a community work. That's the very common things for them. So I felt very ashamed. So, and then I look around which kind of organization, community organization I would like to involve something to the community. So that I think that's a thing. As an academy, we can just stay in the like a university and then enjoying the reading an article and looking at the figure, data, but we have like an extra mission for that. So I think that's the kind of things we can start immediately as an academy to integrate those people from outside immigrants. Yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you, Professor Key. So it's now to wrap it up, the discussion. But before that, I would like to invite Dean Liz to give the final comments. But I heard about, you mentioned about culture. Culture is really an important thing in such a diversity, full of diversity society. So would you kind to make a final comment and probably talk about more about what you feel about culture in health research?
So one of the reactors mentioned nationalism, and I started out I should say that for the to talk to you, this and that. Nationalism is definitely on the rise worldwide. Now, I think the recent election in the United States followed what was happening in a lot of the campaigns. Nationalism still in Europe, and we're seeing as well. Some of the reactions, and even some of the reactions that we're really finding in the research, some of these second generation others might be a result of nationalism. And so as people begin to try to reassert their national pride and cultures, in reaction to what they see as an invasion of culture, I think that's a lot of what's happening. So this is where I think, again, the communication issue becomes important. I don't know if it's a top-down or a bottom-up problem. I think it's probably both. I see, I can give examples of political leaders using nationalism to their advantage. I can also see examples of people on the streets doing it. I don't know that one is causing the other, or if it's just sort of a reaction. But the leaders, I think it's up to the leaders to try to change it. Talk about it. I don't need to talk about it. Some countries like the United States, I think we have an advantage in that we have been the most cultural country for so long. We haven't run out. But we have had many cultures in the country for a long time, so it's not a new problem for us. For Taiwan, for South Korea, it's a more recent problem. And maybe you'll do better because you have our experience and our to learn.
Okay, thank you, Liz. So now is the time closing the discussion. Thank you very much for your participation and for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you for all our panelists. Now we'd like to take a group photo, so would you mind standing up? Thank you. And this panel discussion concludes our morning session. I'm pretty sure that we all learned so much. And today's discussion highlighted the multi-phased nature of health equity. If you feel this is a stimulating discussion and like to further discuss, we have this afternoon section where we have International Symposium on Health Equity and Resilience. Please come back at 1:30 this place for further discussion. Before that, enjoy your lunch. Thank you, everyone.